Are you ready to dive into one of the most game-changing westerns ever put on screen? Today, we'll journey through the raw, riveting world of The Wild Bunch. This 1969 classic rattled Hollywood with its gritty themes, intense shootouts, and daring vision. Now, let's jump right into 20 pivotal moments that solidified its legend. 1. The origins and the Oscar nomination. Back in the late 1960s, a stuntman named Roy N. Sickner had an idea that would challenge the traditional Western narrative. His concept revolved around older outlaws struggling to survive in a rapidly modernizing world. Sickner's real-life experiences gave the story a rugged authenticity that typical studio pictures often lacked. It felt personal, like it was born from dusty streets and saddle sores rather than polished studio offices. Soon, writer Waylon Green took Sickner's skeletal story and molded it into a more formal screenplay. He built stronger character motivations, tightened the conflicts, and shaped the arcs of these desperate men who realized they were on the brink of obsolescence. But the script didn't stop evolving there. Once director Sam Peckinpah stepped in, everything changed again. Peckinpah was notorious for rewriting scripts in ways that amplified grim realism and moral ambiguity. He believed westerns had been too sanitized for too long, and he wanted to show a harsher, more unforgiving frontier. Waylon Green recognized that Peckinpah's version was far more than a light polish. In his view, it was a complete transformation. The Writers Guild eventually agreed, awarding co-credit to both Green and Peckinpah for the screenplay, alongside Sickner. And then came the big surprise. Their work got an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Although they lost out to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, it was still a triumph, especially for Peckinpah, who never again basked in Oscar glory. That single nomination validated the film's hard-edged storytelling and broke down assumptions about what westerns could achieve artistically. 2. The rivalry with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. In 1969, there was a fresh wave of westerns on the horizon. Warner Brothers saw the unflinching grit of The Wild Bunch as a big draw, but they faced serious competition from 20th Century Fox's upcoming Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Both films explored outlaw lifestyles at a time when the Old West was fading fast. However, the tones couldn't have been more different. One was grittier, drenched in moral gray areas, while the other took a lighter, buddy movie approach. Warner Brothers wanted to ensure The Wild Bunch made it to theaters first. They feared that once Butch Cassidy started charming people, audiences might be reluctant to watch a far bloodier western. On the flip side, Fox worried about the historical fact that Butch Cassidy's real-life gang had been called the Wild Bunch. If the two films came out too close together, viewers could mix them up, or worse, feel burned out by western stories. To dodge confusion, Fox decided to rename Butch Cassidy's crew to the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, taking inspiration from their Wyoming hideout. In the end, each movie found its own success. The Wild Bunch may have hit theaters first, but Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was hardly overshadowed. Both pictures made waves, showing that the Western still had room for wildly different styles. Their rivalry showcased just how competitive Hollywood had become, especially for a genre many people thought was on its last legs. 3. Casting DEAK Thornton. The role of DEAK Thornton required an actor capable of portraying internal conflict, regret, and a dogged sense of duty. Peckinpah initially eyed Richard Harris, who had impressed him during the making of Major Dundee. Another possibility was Brian Keith, a rugged performer Peckinpah knew from The Westerner and The Deadly Companions, but neither one locked in. Keith turned it down, and Harris was never formally approached. Time was running short, and Peckinpah needed someone who could embody the perfect mix of desperation and resolution. Then he caught a screening of The Dirty Dozen. There, Robert Ryan stood out. Ryan delivered such a natural blend of rage, remorse, and quiet strength that Peckinpah immediately knew he had his DEAK. On paper, DEAK Thornton is a man who once ran with outlaws but has been coerced by the law to hunt down his former friends. He despises what he's doing even as he does it. This moral tug-of-war fit Ryan's style perfectly. He'd often played characters wrestling with bigger questions, like loyalty, justice, and survival. With that locked in, DEAK Thornton became a classic Western figure, reflecting the entire film's theme. A world in transition, and people forced to pick sides whether they want to or not. 4. William Holden's Second Chance. By the late 1960s, William Holden was no longer the shining star he'd once been. Decades had passed since Sunset Boulevard and Stalag 17. Hollywood was changing, and aging leading men struggled to keep pace. Meanwhile, the role of Pike Bishop in The Wild Bunch had been refused by multiple icons: Lee Marvin, Burt Lancaster, James Stewart, Charlton Heston, Gregory Peck, Sterling Hayden, Richard Boone, and Robert Mitchum. Even Lee Marvin initially agreed before taking a bigger paycheck for Paint Your Wagon. Holden was hungry for a comeback. He saw Pike Bishop not just as another tough-guy cowboy, but as a man weighed down by a lifetime of regrets. By embracing that angle, Holden transformed Pike into someone more than a simple gunslinger. He was a fallen hero clinging to the remnants of his code in a world that no longer valued it. Holden's performance breathed sorrow and stubborn determination into every scene. You could see the lines on his face, sense the exhaustion in his eyes. Audiences noticed, too. His portrayal lent The Wild Bunch an emotional core amidst all the chaos. People found themselves rooting for Pike Bishop, even though they knew he was no saint. For Holden, playing Pike was a triumphant rebound, proof that he could handle complex, layered roles in a new era of filmmaking. 5th. Revolutionizing gun sounds. In older westerns, gunfire often had a generic, recycled quality. Most studios pulled from the same library of audio clips, ignoring whether a character was firing a revolver, a rifle, or a shotgun. Sam Peckinpah refused to let that happen in The Wild Bunch. Having spent his youth around real firearms, he knew each weapon had its own distinct boom, crack, or echo. So he insisted that the film's sound team record actual guns in various natural settings. The crew had their work cut out for them. They recorded pistols in tight canyons, where the reports would bounce back in sharp echoes. They captured rifles firing across open fields, letting the echo roll away into the distance. For shotguns and machine guns, they took extra care to emphasize the deep thud or the relentless rat-a-tat that makes your heart pound. It wasn't enough just to layer standard stock sounds. Peckinpah wanted each round to feel personal and each burst of gunfire to jolt the audience. When The Wild Bunch hit theaters, viewers felt immersed in the violence. Bullets tore through the air with a new ferocity, leaving behind the sense that every shot carried weight. It marked a turning point in how crucial audio design could be for realism. After this, future filmmakers paid closer attention to the sonic details, learning that the right sounds can reinforce storytelling just as powerfully as stunning visuals or strong performances. 6. Ernest Borgnine's Broken Foot. Renowned character actor Ernest Borgnine took on the role of Dutch Engstrom, Pike Bishop's steadfast ally. At 52, Borgnine was no stranger to physically demanding parts. But fate dealt him an extra challenge. He arrived on set with a broken foot from a previous shoot. A broken foot on a Western set brimming with horseback riding, frantic chases, and chaotic shootouts sounded like a recipe for disaster. Instead, Borgnine soldiered on. He wore a special cast hidden under his costume and tried to mask any limp. A double handled the worst stunts, but Borgnine still performed many of his own scenes. His unwavering commitment injected an extra layer of plausibility into Dutch. When you watch him grimace or move a bit gingerly, that's partly the pain talking, lending realism to a character forged by years of rough living. The fact that Borgnine could still ride, shoot, and banter despite a broken foot speaks volumes about the film's resilient cast. Peckinpah's chaotic directing style demanded tremendous physicality, and Borgnine delivered without complaint. Years later, fans and fellow actors alike marveled at how a serious injury never derailed his performance, or the film's rigorous production schedule. 7. Other on-set accidents. When you make a movie loaded with explosions, galloping horses, and shootouts, accidents are almost guaranteed. Over the course of its 79-day shoot, The Wild Bunch teetered on the edge of danger. Remarkably, the cast and crew emerged with only a few notable injuries. Ben Johnson, who played Tector Gorsh, broke a finger on a machine gun prop. Meanwhile, William Holden got burns on his arm from a malfunctioning squib, the small explosive device meant to simulate bullet hits and spurts of blood. While these injuries undoubtedly hurt, they were minor compared to what might have happened under Sam Peckinpah's intense demands for on-screen authenticity. He pushed stunts to their limits, wanting scenes to look and feel genuinely hazardous. That approach gave the film its visceral power, but it also placed enormous pressure on everyone involved. In many ways, it was a test of will, physical endurance, and sheer nerve. Given the scale of the shootouts, with countless extras, horses, and special effects, the relatively low number of injuries feels almost miraculous. Everyone, actors, stunt coordinators, and behind-the-scenes techs, pulled together to make the chaos appear real but remain controlled. It's a testament to their skill that audiences still talk about the film's exhilarating action sequences rather than any tragic accident that might have overshadowed the production. 8. The Exploding Bridge Showdown. One of the most nerve-wracking sequences in The Wild Bunch revolves around a precarious bridge primed to go up in flames. The plan called for men and horses to race across just before the dynamite rigging exploded. Stuntman Joe Canutt worried the timing was so tight it could lead to disaster. Special effects coordinator Bud Hulber brushed off these concerns, which only heightened tensions among the stunt crew. Desperate to prevent a catastrophe, Canutt devised a peculiar backup plan. He told Gordon T. Dawson to stand behind Hulber, club in hand. If the riders fell prematurely, potentially leaving them in the blast zone, Dawson was to knock Hulber unconscious before he could trigger the final explosion. It sounds outrageous, but in the swirl of dust and adrenaline, it felt like a necessary failsafe. Luckily, the sequence went off perfectly. Horses thundered past in a frenzy, the final charges detonated on cue, and the bridge blew apart in a grand display. What audiences saw was a breathtaking stunt that made them grip their seats. What they didn't see was the underlying tension behind the scenes, emblematic of Peckinpah's brand of filmmaking, always teetering on the line between brilliance and recklessness. 9th, Sam Peckinpah's fiery personality. Sam Peckinpah was a complicated figure. Legendary for both his directorial genius and his fiery temper, he drank heavily, argued loudly, and hated compromise. If a scene didn't feel real enough, he'd push his actors to the brink, physically or emotionally, until they captured exactly the rawness he was looking for. Some found this thrilling, while others considered it outright abusive. Hollywood was littered with tales of Peckinpah hurling props or shouting matches that ended in bitter grudges. Yet, in quieter moments, he could show surprising warmth, even goofiness. He joked around with cast members, bonding over drinks while forging intense loyalty. Many who worked with him, despite the stress, still admired his fierce dedication to telling stories that cut deep. His approach to The Wild Bunch mirrored his internal chaos. The film's harsh world of dusty outlaws, moral ambiguity, and explosive violence felt like an extension of Peckinpah's own personality. He loathed the sanitized westerns that had dominated earlier decades, believing the genre needed a heavy dose of grim truth. That determination propelled The Wild Bunch into uncharted territory, giving us a film that was both shocking and compelling. It remains a testament to how Peckinpah's stormy soul found its perfect outlet on screen. 10th, Strother, Martin and the Horse Prank. Peckinpah's sense of humor often leaned toward the sadistic. Just ask Strother Martin, who was terrified of horses. Martin had a small but notable part, and Peckinpah decided to exploit that fear for authenticity. He assigned Martin the tallest horse on set and positioned it on a steep incline, making it incredibly difficult to mount. Martin tried to play it cool, but every time he attempted to swing up, the horse shifted. Crew members stifled laughter, watching Martin's escalating panic. Peckinpah believed real fear made for a more genuine performance. To him, this was method directing. Throw your actor into an actual scenario that mirrors the character's plight, then see what happens. Debate lingers. Was that a cruel trick or a twisted stroke of genius? Regardless, the outcome is on film. Martin's nervous eyes and stiff posture bring a dash of humor and tension to a movie loaded with violence. It's a small but telling moment. In Peckinpah's view, if a little terror improved the scene, it was worth it. For Martin, it was likely an unforgettable and maybe traumatizing highlight of the shoot. 11th. Filming in Parras, Mexico. For a dusty early 20th century setting, Peckinpah chose Parras, a town in Coahuila, Mexico that still preserved much of its old-world charm. It's home to what's reputedly the oldest winery in the Americas, lending historical depth to the location. In 1968, the place was far from modern, with sun-scorched roads and unspoiled architecture that perfectly fit the film's 1913 time frame. Rumor says that the local government planned to run power lines through the town during production. Fearing they'd ruin the authentic skyline, Peckinpah's producers allegedly paid officials to postpone the electrical upgrade. Some watchers claim you can still spot a few power lines in the background if you look closely, but for the most part, Parras offered a period-accurate environment few studio backlots could match. However, filming on location was never easy. The cast and crew grappled with scorching heat, technical hiccups, and language barriers. Locals were hired as extras, and their presence contributed to the film's sense of realism. Scenes of raucous celebrations or tense standoffs felt grounded because genuine townspeople populated them. By shooting in Parras, Peckinpah anchored the Wild Bunch in a landscape that truly seemed untouched by time, reinforcing the story of outlaws out of step with the modern era closing in around them. The Gargantuan Wardrobe Challenge. Gordon Dawson, the film's costume supervisor, faced a Herculean task, fitting hundreds of extras, including real soldiers, plus the main cast, in period-appropriate outfits. The biggest hurdle? The script demanded relentless gunfights, meaning uniforms and civilian clothes were constantly getting torn, stained with fake blood, or shredded by squibs. After nearly every take, Dawson and his team scrambled to wash, patch, or replace these items. They had about 350 sets of Mexican Army uniforms for scenes that required throngs of soldiers. While that sounds ample, it was nowhere near enough for a large-scale shoot where each uniform might be destroyed several times a day. Thus, the costume department ran a rapid assembly line. After one scene ended, they'd gather the damaged uniforms, rinse off the blood, stitch them up, and get them back into circulation for the next batch of extras. Despite the frantic pace, continuity rarely faltered. On screen, it appears as though they had an endless supply of pristine uniforms. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Dawson's crew worked overtime to maintain the illusion of a massive, well-supplied force. Their dedication brought gritty believability to the film's final cut, proving that even the smallest details, like replacing bullet-torn fabric, can make or break the authenticity of a historical epic. 13. Editing battles and the astonishing cut count. Although The Wild Bunch garnered much attention for its explicit violence, another battlefield emerged after filming: the editing room. Initially, the movie wasn't raking in the box office numbers Warner Brothers had hoped for. The studio believed the runtime was too long, limiting showtimes per day. So producer Phil Feldman cut about 10 minutes without notifying Peckinpah. When Peckinpah found out, he was livid. Vital scenes that fleshed out motivations and character arcs were gone, leaving the story feeling unbalanced. Critics who saw the shortened version complained that it felt disjointed. Some found it hard to follow the plot. Peckinpah never forgave Feldman for this betrayal. He cut off contact, refusing to speak to him again. Only after Peckinpah's death in 1984 were the missing minutes restored, allowing viewers to see the film as he'd intended. Beyond that drama, The Wild Bunch boasted an extraordinary number of cuts, around 3,643 edits in total. Some lasted mere frames, creating a kinetic style that immersed audiences in the chaos of gunfights. While rapid editing is common today, it was a bold innovation in 1969, pushing the envelope on how pacing could intensify an audience's emotional response. Over time, critics came to hail this approach as visionary, proving that the post-production battles were ultimately worth the trouble. 14. Real Mexican soldiers on screen. In many Hollywood films, extras playing soldiers are just that, extras. But Peckinpah took a different route for The Wild Bunch, hiring actual Mexican soldiers from a local cavalry regiment. While the trickiest stunts still went to specialized American stunt people, these real troops filled out the background in grand battle sequences, especially in the film's climactic shootouts. This decision lent a layer of authenticity that's tough to replicate with actors who are merely costumed to appear military. Real soldiers carried themselves differently, followed commands with automatic precision, and brought a sense of discipline that no script can truly teach. Their presence also added cultural and historical resonance, showing that the film was literally supported by the region's own defenders. Of course, having active soldiers on a Hollywood set came with unique challenges. Communication had to be clear to prevent misunderstandings, especially involving firearms and explosives. Even so, the synergy worked. When you see lines of uniformed men pushing through smoke and debris, you're seeing real cavalry in action. This approach suited Peckinpah's insistence on realism. It also provided a glimpse into how genuine military movements might look in the swirling dust of the film's final showdown. 15. Matthew Peckinpah's cameo. Blink, and you'll miss it. But Sam Peckinpah's own son, Matthew, appears in the opening heist scene. Two children watch in wide-eyed astonishment as outlaws ride by, scooping up a sack of money. The moment lasts only a few seconds. Nevertheless, it underscores one of the film's recurring themes: how rampant violence impacts innocent bystanders. In a world dominated by grizzled men committing robberies, these two kids serve as a fragile note of humanity. Their expressions of shock and confusion mirror the audience's reaction. Peckinpah likely inserted his son not just as a fun cameo, but also to stress how everyday lives, and childhood itself, could be upended by the brutality swirling around them. Viewers who do catch Matthew Peckinpah's face sometimes say that fleeting image resonates more than the endless gunshots. It's a reminder that behind every act of violence, there could be an unseen ripple effect on children, families, and entire communities. For a director who prided himself on unvarnished depictions of brutality, it was perhaps Peckinpah's subtle way of showing that even in a savage world, innocence still exists, and it's profoundly vulnerable. 16. Non-actors in the wine vat. One of the film's more lighthearted sequences shows actors Ben Johnson and Warren Oates laughing it up in a large vat of wine with two women. On the surface, it's a moment of raucous partying, a brief reprieve from the harsh realities around them. But the real surprise is that these women were not professional actresses. They were local sex workers recruited from a nearby brothel. Peckinpah, in typical audacious form, liked to brag that Warner Brothers was inadvertently footing the bill for these women's services. His reasoning? Why hire actresses to pretend they know how to party when you can hire people who do it for a living? It was an offbeat choice that, in theory, added authenticity to the film's debauched vibe. Critics and audiences alike sometimes argue over whether this crosses ethical lines. Yet there's no denying that the scene has an unforced chaotic energy. Johnson and Oates seem genuinely caught up in the atmosphere, while the women appear at ease being themselves. It's a stark contrast to the rest of the film, dominated by tension and violence. In that brief interlude, you sense the raw, messy humanness that Peckinpah was aiming to capture, where high spirits collide with a world that's otherwise dark and dangerous. 17. The improvised final walk. Late in The Wild Bunch, there's a solemn, almost ritualistic walk taken by the film's anti-heroes. Originally, the script had them leaving a brothel and cutting straight to a confrontation with General MUSTACHE. But Peckinpah changed his mind on set, deciding to extend that moment into a slow, measured march through a dusty village. He instructed the assistant director to wrangle extras so they'd line the path, looking on with fear, curiosity, or both. This decision produced a haunting scene. The outlaws emerge worn and resigned, as if they know they're heading toward an end they can't avoid. By lingering on each character's face, Peckinpah builds anticipation for the looming bloodbath. It's often referred to as the last walk, capturing that sense of finality. With the tension ratcheted up, viewers can almost hear the thunder of their own heartbeat as the men step closer to destiny. Film historians frequently cite this improvised sequence as a masterstroke, showing how Peckinpah's improvisations could elevate a scene from standard to iconic. It set the stage for a climactic showdown, making the violence that follows feel both inevitable and tragic. Audiences are left with the feeling that these men, for all their crimes and sins, are willingly walking into the jaws of fate, an act that defines their peculiar code of honor. 18. William Holden's mustache debate. It sounds trivial, but William Holden and Sam Peckinpah clashed fiercely over whether Pike Bishop should sport a mustache. Peckinpah was adamant. A mustache symbolized the weathered life Pike had led. Holden disliked how he appeared on camera with facial hair, thinking it might distract viewers or diminish his well-known face. Though he resisted, Holden eventually conceded. He wore a false mustache during shooting. If you look closely, it's not always entirely seamless, but it does give Pike a more rugged, jaded aura. In some ways, that small patch of hair represents Peckinpah's commitment to authenticity, even in minute details. He believed every aspect of a character's look communicated a piece of their history. Holden may not have loved the mustache, but the end result was a seamless merging of star power and directorial vision. Pike Bishop's unshaven face matches the dusty, cutthroat environment around him. That detail, small though it is, helps unify the film's overall aesthetic, reminding viewers that these men are not polished heroes, but relics of a vanishing era. Sometimes it's in such tiny touches that a character becomes fully real, anchoring an entire performance. 19. The Killer for Huerta. Historical reference. In one blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment, DEAK Thornton refers to General Mapache as a killer for Huerta, slipping a dose of real history into the film. Victoriano Huerta was a Mexican general who wrested power in 1913 by orchestrating the downfall and murder of President Francisco Madero. This plunged the country into chaos and civil war, intensifying the instability that the film's outlaws find themselves caught in. By pinpointing Huerta, Peckinpah grounds his story in actual events rather than a purely fictional setting. The film's outlaws are not just up against random bandits or invented warlords, they're tangling with a figure linked to one of the most turbulent times in Mexico's history. This layer of real-world context underscores how fluid and fragile authority was in 1913. For viewers unfamiliar with the Mexican Revolution, the reference might fly under the radar. But for those who catch it, it adds a new layer of appreciation. The brutality in the Wild Bunch reflects a larger social upheaval, weaving the fates of Pike Bishop and his crew into the violent tides of history. It echoes the film's central theme: a rapidly changing world can destroy even the toughest men if they're too set in their ways. 20. Homosexual undertones and the film's legacy. Perhaps the most unexpected detail about the Wild Bunch is the rumor that L.Q. Jones and Strother Martin suggested subtle homosexual undertones for their characters, T.C. and Coffer. Instead of making it overt, they wove in small signals, looks, gestures, hints that there might be more to their partnership. Peckinpah apparently greenlit this idea, revealing a willingness to let his cast explore themes far outside the typical Western mold. Over the years, the film's impact has only grown. Despite a budget of around $6 million, it raked in roughly $10.5 million domestically, which was decent, but not mind-blowing. Critics were divided at first. Some lauded its honest brutality, while others condemned its excessive violence. Audiences, meanwhile, found themselves grappling with a Western that defied heroic tropes and offered a bleaker look at men living by the gun. The American Film Institute eventually ranked it among the 100 greatest American films, placing it at 80. Directors like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino have cited The Wild Bunch as an influence, pointing to its innovative editing, morally ambiguous leads, and orchestrated carnage as pillars of modern cinema. In many ways, Peckinpah's film rewrote the genre's rulebook, pushing the Western into a space where loyalty, betrayal, and raw survival overshadow the clear-cut heroics of earlier decades. And there you have it, the untamed saga of the Wild Bunch, from script rewrites to groundbreaking gunfire, from broken feet to explosive bridges. If you enjoyed exploring these 20 pivotal moments, give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment sharing your favorite piece of trivia. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into classic cinema and the wild stories behind them. Your support means we can keep venturing into Hollywood's most unforgettable tales. Thanks for watching, And until next time, stay adventurous.